All right, man, peace. So we've been following the growing narrative between the NFL and the NFL protesters, meaning the players who have decided to engage in the kneeling protest that was instigated by Mr. Colin Kaepernick. Of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Hello and welcome. We're joined today by Fox NFL analyst Tony Gonzalez and Super Bowl champion Eric Davis. Let's start in the NFL, where reportedly the league is considering a rule change that will require all players to stand during the national anthem. Commissioner Roger Goodell addressed the issue of player protest in a letter to teams today, writing, quote, "Like many of our fans, we believe that everyone should stand for the national anthem."
Now, why did he lead off his memo saying, like many of our fans? Once again, and this is to a lot of the liberal and the pro-blacks and the internet revolutionaries who like to run around the internet and talk about what the players should be doing. First and foremost, the NFL is a corporate enterprise. It is a business. And the bottom line is, how are you serving your constituency, your fan base, and are they happy with the product? When the fans are going to these stadiums and they're watching these protests, it's not galvanizing them to want to come together with black people or wanting to have this conversation with blacks that liberal black people claim that they want. Nothing is getting resolved, and the only thing that's happening is that the bottom line is getting hurt. And when the bottom line gets hurt for the owners, it's also going to affect the players. It's going to reverberate in many different ways monetarily for them. This is a completely emotional move that these players are making. They're allowing themselves to be manipulated by the internet and by low-level thinkers. But, a lot of times to be manipulated by a low-level thinker is because you're a low-level thinker. Anyway.
Anthem. It is an important moment in our game. We want to honor our flag and our country, and our fans expect that of us.
That's also Trump. Trump has not just contacted Jerry Jones. I guarantee you that he's spoken with Roger Goodell. The NFL has always been very closely linked with quote-unquote patriotism and the armed forces. I remember watching the Super Bowl between the Giants and the Buffalo Bills back in January of '91 when Whitney Houston sang the national anthem. And, that was one of the first times that I remember them having a simulcast with troops out there in, I believe it was in Kuwait, where they showed them watching the game. This is something that the NFL has very meticulously crafted to align themselves with quote unquote patriotism and the armed forces. And they are not going to allow, or they're going to try to not allow, this implosion from occurring. They're trying to smother the fire right now while they can. And I'm going to tell you, brothers, if need be, they're going to clear out any and every player who wants to insist on maintaining this protest. People like Shannon Sharp think that this is a game. They think that this is for fun and that this is a show. These owners, they're not playing. They're not going to play. They're going to issue a memo right now. If these players continue to protest, they're going to wait until the off season. And they're going to clean house. I promise you that.
We also care deeply about our players and respect their opinions and concerns about critical social issues. The controversy over the anthem is a barrier to having honest conversations and making real progress on the underlying issues.
Right, which is something that I've been saying for the longest time. If you're truly sincere about wanting to have conversations with your God, the so-called white man, the affluent, rich Caucasian man, that is who the God of the liberal blacks is. That is who the God of the pro-blacks is the affluent Caucasian man. If you're that, devoted to having a conversation with him, the best way to go about it is not to alienate him by offending him through his national anthem or through rebelling against what he says his flag stands for. That's just common sense. When you want to negotiate with somebody, you make them feel comfortable, not uncomfortable. People are trying to use the Martin Luther King paradigm or the Martin Luther King methodology, but they don't understand he was receiving help from the U.S. government on the top side. The U.S. government, through the socialist plant, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was there to assist him in every way that he could.
Issues. We need to move past this controversy. We want to do that together with our players.
And when I say that Lyndon Johnson was there to assist him, what I mean is this. They both had the same overall end game, which was to introduce a lot of socialist reforms. Okay? The Great Society. That's what it was. The Great Society. Yeah, I mean, Lyndon Baines Johnson was a socialist plant. He was a plant for the international bankers. I mentioned this before already. But he was working along with King with the classic Hegelian dialectic tactic of pressure from above and pressure from below. They met in the middle. Once they were done with Martin Luther King, they just finished him off. He was too much of a wild card anyway.
All right, Cowherd. Should the NFL require players to stand for the anthem?
I was never a big believer in it, but I think they feel trapped. I think they feel like they have to. We had the president and the vice president situation. I thought that felt like it was almost rigged. I think they think now that...
Of course it was rigged. That's part of the storyline. It's part of the narrative. Trump is a master manipulator, man. And this is why I stated already. LeBron James thinks that he knows what he's getting into by trying to go back and forth with Donald Trump. When you go back and forth with Donald Trump, you have to have the mentality of the serpent. And LeBron does not have that. He's too emotional. Way too emotional. And he just doesn't understand what's going on that level. LeBron is shrewd to a degree, but he's not cold and calculating to the level where he really will want to go back and forth with Trump. He thinks he does because he's an attention whore. But when Trump decides to turn his gaze on LeBron, it's going to totally mess him up because he's not even going to be able to concentrate on playing basketball when Trump is finished with his ass.
Now they've got a president they're in the crosshairs of. They got players. Let me say this. Maybe it's because my dad was a businessman like yours. I've always understood what this platform is about. Subway sandwiches. It's not about sports. If Subway sandwiches and Ford and Geico Insurance said we don't want Colin Cowherd on the air, I would not be on the air.
Absolutely not. Thank you, sir. It's all about corporate sponsorships. We live in a corporate society. Okay? I think that this is where a lot of people get things twisted, particularly the so-called black man. It's why I laugh when Shannon Sharpe talks about what the Constitution promised so-called black people. How could the Constitution have promised us anything when at that point we were at best second-class citizens in this country? Free blacks were considered second-class citizens at that point. Not even talking about the institution of slavery, which at that point by 1787 was predominantly race-based. I mean, Shannon just doesn't know what he's talking about. After the 14th Amendment, everybody in the United States was pretty much recognized as a debt slave. In 1871, America was incorporated. It became the Corporation of the United States of America, which is what is still recognized as pretty much today. Right now, the official name is the Corporation of Homeland Security. In 1913, you had the formation of the Federal Reserve through the National Banking Act. In 1933, they eradicated the ability for you to use gold in commerce. You had to turn in all your gold. That was an official edict of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In 1965, they got rid of the silver. Okay? So, to make a long story short, everything here is based on corporate transactions, based on commercial transactions. Every person is viewed as a piece of monetary, as a form of monetary exchange. You're not viewed as a flesh and blood human being. Okay? So when you understand these things and you understand the system that you're in, you understand that it's really nothing personal per se. This is just modern day Babylon. This is the updated version of Babylon. This is the Matrix. This is what this is. So when you grasp that and you understand where you're at and why you're here, then you understand how to survive here mentally and spiritually. That's the main thing. Most of our people are really at their wits' end sanity wise because they don't know how to survive here mentally and spiritually.
This is not about commentary or opinion. It's that as I am to the advertisers, a conduit to the audience, and I am whatever works for the audience.
Absolutely, as are these NFL players, and they don't grasp that. They don't understand that. They think they're looking at this from an emotional perspective. And you could look at the looks on their face. A lot of these so-called black men in the NFL, this is a little too much for them. Right now, they're in the eye of the storm on a racial issue, and most of them don't even know what their race is. They think that their race is a skin color.
When did athletes forget? Sports is business. Once again, the NFL, the NBA just doubled down on this 2 weeks ago. NBA said no kneeling. Why? It's not good for business.
Thank you, sir.
When I'm reading players and athletes, I think, okay, they went to college, and college isn't supposed to be business, but frankly is. But nobody questions whether pro sports is a business.
Absolutely. And college is absolutely a business as well. Like I said, the college is where you get introduced into when you get introduced into the system of credit accrual, right? That's when you get your first major debt when you go to college. You're created to be a debt slave. Once they get you into their system under debt, then you constantly have to work that off for the rest of your life.
Like, are we forgetting why their athletes make $19 million a year? Because of Ford and Subway sandwiches and Budweiser.
And the attachment to Americana and traditional American values.
And this is where these athletes are erring. They don't really understand what's going on. When you have people like Jemele Hill, and this is why I mentioned this already, when you have these idiots like Jemele Hill on Twitter talking about if you really want to hit the Cowboys in the pocket, then stop supporting their sponsorships. You fucking idiot. The sponsors are the ones who not only pay the Cowboys, they're also providing the money that allow the corporation that you work for, ESPN, to pay billions of dollars to broadcast those games. That's why they could pay you in the high six figures. You fucking dummy. But see, it's easier for her to get on Twitter and do that shit rather than sit her ass at home and be a good wife to a man. Right? Which is what the liberal black woman does not want to do. She wants to grandstand and run on the internet and talk about race all day and really not be sincere about it.
Again, it was a part of the business strategy of Pete Rozelle and the NFL to attach the league to traditional values and the national anthem and support of the military. That was a part of the television script. I just think these players, a lot of them, or a small portion of them, don't understand the business they're in.
At all.
Yeah. They're young and they got a lot of money.
And they're very emotional, emotionally unstable. Most of them probably raised in homes where they were not really taught how to understand what's going on around them. They're phenomenal athletes, so they've pretty much been bred to just believe that the only thing that they have to offer are their physiques from probably about the age of 7 and upward.
They're addicted to Twitter, just like we talked about yesterday. Their iPhone is constantly telling them, protest, protest, protest.
Absolutely. Cosign, cosign, cosign. They've fallen down the woke rabbit hole, right? Twitter victims.
Protest. That'll make you popular. And so I just think there's a few misguided guys, and Twitter and social media put so much pressure on guys that, yeah, they have forgotten the business that they're in, why they're getting rich and why they're getting so much money. And so I think this is the appropriate step for the NFL.
So do I. All right. I think that it's the appropriate step for the NFL to force players to stand for the national anthem because it's time for the so-called black man to grow up and be a man. If you're going to rebel, if you're going to resist, then you do it in a way that is intelligent. You don't do it in a way that is emotional, because all it's going to do is it's going to set you farther back than you think you want to go to. Plus, the so-called black man needs to establish what is your end game, what is your finish line. All right, stop talking about how the finish line is equality. That shit doesn't exist. All right, you either want the rulership or you want to remain a vassal. All right, do you actually want to run your household? When are you going to stop being scared of the so-called black woman? When are you going to stop being intimidated by the Caucasian man and putting him on a pedestal? When are you going to stop doing that? When are you going to stop being so emotionally unstable and so easily warped by what you see on the internet? When is it going to be time for us to accept our real history? and embrace a culture where we can actually create a framework for our own people and stop running around trying to set up athletes as leaders. That shit is an abomination.
You can't take the time to explain this to everybody. Sometimes you just got to make rules and move on.
I don't think that the league should do it, but doing it might actually change the narrative. Because if you make the rule, which they can, it's a private boys club, as we know, and there are rule changes every single year. There are rule changes that affect the offense every year. There are rule changes that affect the defense every year. And you have, whether you like it or not, I didn't like the fact that I couldn't hit Tony in the head anymore. But you got to learn to not hit Tony in the head. That's a rule change. This is a rule change that will affect every player, offensively, defensively, special teams.
And they should have made the rule change in the offseason, but just thinking about it, they probably didn't do it because they didn't want to make it too blatant. If they would have changed the rule in the offseason and then not had any teams bring Kaepernick in, it would have been too blatant that it was purposeful, that it was a purposeful stratagem that they executed to get rid of Kaepernick. I think that they just hoped that if they left him out, that this whole thing would fade away. So when Trump came and did what he did, which was pretty much put a little cherry bomb and throw a cherry bomb through their window, they didn't know what to do. But it was a brilliant strategy by Trump because now he's making them deal with this issue. And what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to bring all the rabbits, like I've stated before, he's trying to make all the rabbits run out of their burrow so he can shoot them all one by one. He wants to take that entire rebellious, kneeling spirit out of the NFL in one fell swoop. And it was a very masterful strategy that he's utilizing. They still don't understand what Trump is doing. They think that Trump is just talking shit. He wants to put the owners in the position where they have to cut off the heads of every rebel.
You have to deal with it. It's under this veil that you're affecting someone's rights, okay? And we understand that, and we all have the right to feel the way that we want to feel, which is why I don't think they should do it. But it being done, it's one of those situations that pro athletes, like in basketball, you have rules that you have to follow and you have to abide by. There are rules right now in the CBA that all the players don't like. Like I said, I get it. I think it'll change the narrative.
Yeah. Well, I think that they had no choice. I think it's coming down to that point, kind of what you're saying. I think that's what you're saying, that it's ran its course. And I said this earlier.
Absolutely. It's coming near the end. When I say it's coming near the end, I don't think that the protests are coming near the end. I think that it's coming to a rather penultimate confrontation between the owners and some of these players. And it's going to establish the tone of the NFL from here on out. Due to the CTE issue, controversy, as well as now this Kaepernick issue and controversy, they're going to have to do something. And it would not shock me, as I already stated, to see them tear away a lot of the rebellious or quote unquote the pseudo-revolutionary aspect of what the players are doing, and maybe try to propitiate them by bringing back Kaepernick. Who knows?
What it started out as with Colin Kaepernick to where it is now, the whole kneeling, it's been lost in translation. Who knows what it's about and who knows what it's going to be like going forward. So because of that, I think they're saying, let's just get rid of it. It's becoming a distraction. It's going against the president of the United States now.
It's not becoming a distraction. It started out as a distraction. It started out as a method to promote chaos. Okay? They were hoping that through the chaos that they initiated through the Kaepernick kneeling, that they would be able to force the owners into a position where the owners would be so desperate to bring order back into their league that they would succumb to the whims of the players. The problem is that the owners do not respect what the players want, because the owners and most grown men of other races will not respect men who don't want to create order for themselves over their own. I honestly don't believe that there's ever been a case in history where men of a certain race have turned to men of another race that they say are oppressing them, quote unquote, and ask that person to empower them and return to them all the things that they need to be equal with the oppressor. I don't believe that has a precedent in history. So I have no idea why the so-called black man believes that the Caucasian man, who many of these pro-blacks and internet revolutionaries claim has has been oppressing them for 400 years and is a liar and a this and a that, why do you believe that it's realistic that you would protest to him and that he would actually acquiesce to what you claim you want? Unless the truth of the matter is that you really don't want to be equal. You just want attention. You want him to hug you and love you and kiss you on the forehead and tell you everything's going to be all right. Those of us who pay attention, we know that that's what the so-called pro-black, that's what they really want. And once again, I specified this before. When I say pro-black, I'm not talking about a lot of the brothers who actually are concerned with their own people. I'm talking about most of these fake-ass internet dudes who talk shit all day. And as soon as Monday comes, they're gonna run to the water cooler at work and they're gonna kiss every white person's ass, and then run back home on the internet, the internet bill that their mom is paying for, and talk shit all day on Twitter and Snapchat and Instagram and talk about Kaepernick and all this other silly shit, and have no idea what they're talking about.
Fans are booing.
Fans are booing. It's
Like, don't you think by implementing that rule that you can actually, the guys that want to do the good that they're talking about doing, the guys that want to make the changes that they want to make, you still make your money, you still have your millions, you can still talk to the same people that you're talking about talking to and get into the same communities and do the things you want to do.
Yeah,
but you don't have to talk about the anthem anymore. You can actually talk about
that's what we should have done from the
get-go.
Exactly. Just like Whitlock said, that's what, you could have been farther ahead in what you allege you want in regards to your demands, had you just been respectful in the first place. But that's why I said right now the so-called black community is on the level of a teenager. Teenagers do things for shock. They do things for attention. They do things because they're trying to feel feel their way around adulthood. They don't really know what adulthood is. They're trying to approximate it by being rebellious and telling you how they could do things on their own. In reality, they're not ready. Same thing with the so-called black man and black female here in America. They're not really ready mentally, emotionally, spiritually to have their own, to run their own. But they keep ranting and raving and throwing these tantrums and talking about police brutality. Why is that? Because that's a plea for attention. There's so many things that the so-called black man should be doing in regards to himself. Just basic things. Nothing earth-shattering. Just in regards to, disciplining himself, the type of female that he deals with, how he views himself, how he treats himself, how he takes care of his body, how he takes care of his mind, the things that he allows in his body, the people that he allows around himself. All these things have a far bigger effect on what goes on with our people than so-called police brutality. Right. And then if you want to address the police brutality issue later on, once you have all these things much more together with yourself, in and of yourself, you're not going to be as concerned about all that other shit, because you're going to find that you don't get into a lot of these situations that other people get into. There are certain situations that you get into in life that are unavoidable. That's a part of life. There are tragedies that happen in life. There are people who, they've reached the end of the line, and sometimes they've reached the end of the line in their life, and it is an unfortunate situation in regards to how things end for them. But for the vast majority of people who understand life and understand themselves, a lot of these problems can be avoided if our people are trained to make better decisions and value themselves and love themselves, which most black people don't. Most black people do not love themselves. So-called black people.
Like you said from the beginning. No, Jason, because I do believe that this did say something. This had a purpose. It brought awareness
about
to an
Colin
issue.
Kaepernick.
It brought some awareness.
So look what we're doing right now. We're not talking about Colin Kaepernick right now.
Yeah, no, we're talking about a rule change.
Exactly. Look, I'm already on record. This shit is not going to amount to anything, because it's not meant to amount to anything. Okay, this is a setup by the so-called Black Lives Matter movement to destroy a platform that is used to express unabashed masculinity, that being the NFL. The NFL is an institution that, as I've already stated, is unapologetic to the liberal mass media at large, and that had to be destroyed. by trying to turn the NFL into a woke league like they've done with the NBA.
But you're talking about a part of that rule change. They're also talking about connecting with the players more to possibly help in the communities and do the work these guys want to do.
By the way, this may be off, and cut me off if I'm wrong, but the NBA has said no kneeling, and there doesn't seem to be any movement because the NBA is seen as player friendly.
Yeah, there's no need for movement in the NBA. It's already been firmly established with those players that they can pretty much do what they want. Plus, the owner is super woke. He established his brand when he removed Donald Sterling, which was an orchestrated event to gain the trust of the players.
The NFL, I think, needs to do a better job of communicating with players, and maybe they would have more equity with players if they didn't cut them. I think the NFL players, unlike the NBA players, sometimes feel like I have very few options. I have no control.
Well, part of the reason that the NFL players are treated in the way that they're treated is because of the profession that they've chosen to go into. I think that there's a certain lack of respect that people have for you when you choose to live a self-destructive lifestyle, even if it's as productive as being an NFL athlete. When you pick a sport where basically you have to engage in high-speed collisions every week for 16 weeks a year, not counting practices, not counting off-season training, people will look at you with awe because of your physical prowess, but subconsciously they'll believe that you're an idiot. They'll say, what civilized person would do this? Basically run full speed into another person who's running full speed at you. So that's part of the reason why the NFL owners will never give fully guaranteed contracts. Why would you give a fully guaranteed contract to somebody playing a sport like NFL? Basketball is different. Baseball is different. Those athletes are viewed as being in a sport that is far less hazardous for their health.
Colin, I made this point, and it's much bigger than this segment because we won't have a lot of time to spend on it. The NBA players, most of them spend 1 year in college at best. NFL players stay 3 or 4 years. They indoctrinated into that amateurism, fraudulent system that makes them feel exploited while they're college players for 3 or 4 years. So they come to the NFL with a chip on their shoulder. I just got exploited playing this game. Everybody got rich except for me. That puts a chip on their shoulder. Yes, I do. I think in this environment, not in our era, Eric, you and I are the same age.
I think in this environment.
But in this environment, I think so.
I mean, I know we have to go on this one, but I just think, guys, basketball, the teams are obligated to the players. And football, players are obligated to the team with no say-so. And I think that changes.
Yeah, because the NFL is much more based on a military model.
That changes a lot.
That's part of the narrative in terms of feeling they're exploited, feeling they're not treated the way basketball players are.
Yes, a lot of this is really just an attention grab by a lot of these players. A lot of these guys are jealous of the NBA. They've been for a while, and a lot of it escalated when the NBA players started to get those balloon payments within the last year.
They have New England, where Tom.
But anyway.
All right, Tampa Bay's Gerald McCoy went a step further, saying, quote, I think it's going to be a negative reaction. I don't think guys are going to like it. I think it's going to be a uproar if that's to happen, because you're basically taking away a constitutional right to freedom of speech.
Now, these guys are something else, man. All of a sudden, these guys are constitutional experts. Like, give me a fucking break.
Cowherd, who's to blame for the controversy engulfing the NFL?
The iPhone. It's toppled governments, corporations, CEOs. This is the world we live in.
In other words, he's calling them all Twitter victims who've fallen down the woke rabbit hole. Shit I've been saying for the last, I don't know how many months, man. These people are finally starting to understand what this shit is really all about. These guys are trying to front like they're so empowered and they're so liberated. And all they are is a bunch of damn pawns. Like I said, this guy Malcolm Jenkins, he's another Luciferian, so-called Omega Sci-Fi.
It is the strongest drug of the 21st century, the iPhone, and young people often get addicted to it, and they're empowered by it, certainly. And I think if you're post-50 and you're an owner, and you don't understand how powerful and how fluid these situations are, you have made a grave mistake.
Absolutely. They should have been able to not so much predict, but just understand the power of social media and its ability to influence a lot of these athletes. They spend a lot of time on these different social media platforms, and the opinions of the masses permeate into these athletes' subconscious minds, and it makes them do things that are not always best for themselves. You know, peer pressure is on a whole nother level today due to social media.
Stake. And I think this is the world we live in now. Young people use technology like old people used to use the typewriter. And I think maybe, the Jerry Jones and the commissioners of the league, you better understand this is an avalanche and it doesn't slow down for anybody.
I heard you talk about this on your radio show this morning, and I thought you were making excellent points. And I do think we don't understand social media, its impact, its influence on young people, and that we carry around this phone and it does influence us.
Not just social media's impact on young people, but its impact on weak people. A lot of people out here are very, very mentally weak. They have no form of identity based on their understanding of themselves. Everything is really based on how can I fit in with this hive. Nobody knows who they really are. Nobody asks, how can I be me? Everybody wants to know how they can gain an identity by being a part of a certain movement. A lot of these people don't know why they're here on the earth. They really don't. That's why they're so eager to get down with these different movements and alleged revolutions. And they wouldn't know the foggiest thing about what a revolution is.
But there's someone being paid.
Look at all these guys raising up their right fist. They want to be back in the 60s so bad. This is how you know that the so-called black culture of today is not really satisfactory. It's not fulfilling them. Because if it was, they wouldn't have to try to act like they're back in the 60s. They don't even know where the fist in the air comes from. That's a communist form of expression, the fist in the air.
Paid $40-some-odd million a year to lead this league, and they're getting paid for foresight. And so I'm looking at
the only guy out of all these guys that I halfway respect is Marshawn. Marshawn's the only one who's really doing him. The rest of these niggas, they don't even know what the hell they doing.
Looking at the league right now that it's October. We're not that far from Thanksgiving.
And this nut job right here. Officer, can you tell me why I'm being arrested? I just want to get back to my kids. Oh my God, please.
Thanksgiving. We're 5-6 weeks into the football season, and we're still talking about the national anthem when this should have been handled during the off season.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you, Whitlock.
February, March, April, May, June, July.
And if the owners had done this, it would have forced a lot of these black men to actually think constructively instead of trying to lean back on, let me get the white man's attention. It would have forced them to actually do things in a more enterprising fashion. And no longer would it have given them the out of white man, please come save me, which is really all this shit is about. It's usually what it's about.
This is when you put into effect this new rule because you have the foresight to see, look at where this country's headed. Look what's going on. Look at the conversation in this country. Look at how our whole offseason was dominated by Colin Kaepernick. Is he going to sign? Why didn't they sign him? You should have known this was coming and implemented these type rules and had this argument and debate during the offseason.
They didn't prognosticate all this, Jason Whitlock. They didn't see all this because they didn't count on the emotional energy sustaining this long. This is how you know that they look at the so-called black man like a teenage boy. They believe that he's just throwing a tantrum. And for all intents and purposes, this is a tantrum. But a lot of these guys really believe this. Like this guy, Malcolm Jenkins, he really believes it, quote unquote. But, most likely he's a plug or a plant for the Black Lives Matter movement. Just like, what's his name, Michael Bennett, as well as Kaepernick. Most of these guys who are leading the charge, I guarantee you, are plugged into the socialist/communist Black Lives Matter movement, the anarchist group that's being bankrolled by George Soros.
We're in the middle of the season, and people...
And it's only a matter of time before that gets revealed.
...are meeting with the commissioner, and owners are meeting, talking about the national anthem. I blame ownership and a lack of leadership?
Well, I think you'd have to be a voodoo lady.
No, you just need a little foresight, right? In order to be a general or a king, you got to have some foresight.
I'm looking to a crystal ball to know that this is going to happen. I mean, when you look at it, it's a big problem. And, you can't make players stand. It's like saying, I'm going to make you stand.
No, you can't make them stand, but you can make them face the repercussions for not standing. At the end of the day, they are employees.
What do you say? If I don't stand, then what? I mean, say to all the players, you know what? If you're making us stand, all of us leaving the field. We're not going to play. No, nobody's going to play. Now what happens?
Now they bring in replacement players. It may take a while, but they will bring in replacement players. And don't be surprised if they already start lining up guys to replace the current NFL players in the offseason for guys who want to come and play these type of games next year. Don't be shocked.
What do you think the sponsor's going to say? Well, wait a minute now. We want a football game.
Yeah, the owners are going to play along. They're going to, they're going to take a very meek approach to the players for the rest of this regular season. But in the off season, they are going to, they are going to recalibrate their approach to this issue.
I mean, what do? You
tell the NBA guys that they have to stand, and they stand.
That's the NBA.
And they've always been standing, you dingbat. Nobody has to tell them to stand. That was already collectively bargained that they stand.
Yeah, it's NFL.
Right. The NFL guys want those game checks even more than the NBA guys. They won't even go into a lockout.
I agree with that. I've already stated that. Shannon Sharp thinks that they're going to, he's trying to hype up this big cataclysmic matchup between the owners and the players. Bro, a lot of these guys that are living from check to check, and they're getting 6-figure checks multiple times a year, and most of them are living from check to check. The owners start cutting those checks down, I guarantee you they will fold.
Out. There's no way they're going to risk losing game checks.
I'm not saying it would happen, but it can happen. Anything can happen. It can. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it can happen.
Oh, absolutely, Eric. I mean, shit. A bus could jump the curb and run you over. It don't mean you got to walk down the street with a helmet on.
Because when all of a sudden you tell a guy, look, you're going to wear this gray jacket. You're going to wear this gray. I don't have to. I can wear my black jacket.
I see truth on both of your sides.
Yes.
On the reason why, Christine, is because this is a racial issue.
And
people get emotional.
I get that.
And
absolutely.
And logic sometimes goes out the window.
Well, that should have been out the window. This is why these so-called players will lose this one. They will be given certain concessions, meaning what? The NFL will create certain programs that will put the onus on the players to go into these different communities. The owners may even step out and make little statements or gestures to appease the players, but they're not going to allow themselves to have their feet held over the fire by players. That's just not going to happen. And this tone by the liberal media that the NFL players should look at themselves as equal with the owners, that is not consistent with any form of a functional corporate structure. Nobody who runs a business is going to allow their employee to come into the business and dictate the rules of engagement with the owner or with the constituency that you're supposed to be making money off of. That's how you know that a lot of this narrative is tied into the liberal mass media trying to tear down the NFL. Because the things that they're saying in regards to how the players should be treated and their constitutional right, like, give me a fucking break. Everybody who works in a corporate structure, in a corporate environment, knows that there are rules that you must abide by.
Well, so I don't really like the word blame in this question because I think it has a negative connotation. And for me personally, and listen, I understand the way that everyone believes and you have a right to think whatever you want, but I don't believe that kneeling is a direct hit on people who serve for the country and I have veterans in my family currently serving or who have, and I'm not offended by people kneeling.
Of course you're not. You love the black man's penis too much to be offended by him kneeling. You could care less about black men kneeling.
I think they're just saying they don't appreciate what the flag stands for right now, which is equality. They don't feel like everyone is being treated equal.
The flag does not stand for equality. It was never created to stand for equality. All the flag is a representation of the Corporation of Homeland Security, the branch of the overall worldwide corporate network known as the Corporation of Homeland Security. That's all the American flag stands for. Every flag of every country, all it is basically a logo for that corporate branch. Period.
Which is true. I also don't think that kneeling is going to accomplish what they want to do ultimately. You also have to back that up and talk. That said, I understand it.
Well, that's her saying Kaepernick needs to come out and speak, which is the truth.
And it's affecting the business of the NFL. And I think in order to get your message to as many people as possible, you have to have the platform. And when you start hurting the business, you're taking away from your platform.
Oh, you need to call up Jemele Hill and let her know that.
So I actually really like what the NFL is doing now and saying, and I hope they stick to it, we're going to help you figure out other ways to use the football platform that doesn't require you kneeling. You can do something else, and then let's work together to find a way to get the message across. Because I will admit, we are all talking about this subject because everyone's kneeling, and I don't want to blame them for that.
No, you guys are talking about this subject because there's a concerted attempt by the liberal mass media to intermix politics and sports. It's part of the narrative of America because sports is one of the religions of America. So they're hoping to socially engineer society through sports. That's why you guys are constantly talking about it, because it is essential in order for them to promote a lot of liberal ideologies like homosexuality, lesbianism, feminism. I've said this over and over and over again. They're making you think that this is about you, black men, but this is not about you. I promise you that it's not about you. It's going to come out later on that it's really about the promotion of homosexuality, lesbianism, and feminism. You are going to be left. You're going to be left in the background with your pants down as usual.
We're talking about the national anthem, though.
We are, but it also is, yes, and that's where the majority of the conversation is. But we are talking about equality issues too.
Well, if we were, I think what the people that are upset by the kneeling would argue is that, okay, let's map out America's history from 1776 to right now. Mm-hmm. Are we more equal now than we were at any point along this dotted line? And I think a lot of people would say yes. And so...
But a lot of people also don't understand because it's not in their face. And I say that all the time. Just because something doesn't directly affect you doesn't mean that it's not real.
You know, part of this is about, there is a sense among players that, listen, man, we don't want our free speech muzzled. But
look, let me say this because they've said a lot of things right now. Whitlock asked a hypothetical question. He said, are things more equal now than they were back in 1776? Well, that's speculative because we don't have any cameras from back then. Of course, everybody would assume that the so-called black man was in a deep, dark state of slavery back then and things of that nature. If you were truly to evaluate it, who knows? I don't believe in anything like equality. I believe that things are constantly in flux. And the so-called black man should be looking for rulership. You're either looking for rulership or you're looking to maintain servitude. The so-called black man was a second-class citizen back in the late 1700s into the early 1800s here in America, and he's still a second-class citizen today. So, I mean, to say that you're more equal than you were back then, I don't really know what that means. You're either equal or you're not. Based on that concept, if you abide by that concept. I don't abide by equality. I don't really know what that is supposed to mean. If you mean under the interpretation of the law, as I've already stated, the so-called black man is looked at as a specific type of stock. He's treated a different way. That's why, once again, we should be looking to have our own. We should not be looking for the so-called Caucasian to change his ways or look at us as quote-unquote equal. That is folly. It's a waste of time.
Speech has never been freer. I can literally communicate with the President of the United States within 90 seconds. So it is interesting that players are, I think, feeling like I can't express myself. But frankly, between Twitter, Facebook, commercials, players have never been more viable in my life.
I agree. There's never been more quote-unquote free speech than now. I think that a lot of these players have been activated, first off, by the saturation of social media with events that really have been going on for a long time. That being, you know, the police treatment of so-called black men when they're put under arrest. These things have been going on for a long time. So the fact that people all of a sudden have been affected by this really shows that they were not paying attention before. Not that it shows an upshoot in any type of racial antipathy between the cops and black men. I would guess that if we were to compare how the so-called black man was treated by police now as opposed to the 1960s, I don't think that there would be. I don't think that there would be any confirmation that it's worse now. I think that it just gets covered differently now because you have mass media and basically everybody's a media outlet because of their phones. So one has to wonder what the true impetus of these movements are if it's not racial awareness. I already know what it is. I've already stated it numerous times. It's just another red herring. It's another Trojan horse to get further along in the promotion of lesbianism, homosexuality, feminism, transgenderism. There will be no point where people are truly concerned about the so-called black man.
They've never been more heard, discussed. Now, by the way, almost all of the shows we're doing now, there's at least 2 athletes on the panel. So it is interesting. Players are like, hey, man, we want our voices heard. Whatever side you fall on, I've never heard from more players about more topics.
And about more things that they know very little about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, man, like I said before, Whitlock is like a home run hitter. He either hits it out the ballpark or he strikes out. On this topic, he's 100% on the mark for the most part. You hear so much from people who don't know shit about what they're talking about. I don't need to hear about race from Michael Bennett. That nigga, he looked like somebody that would be sitting in the back of the class in detention.
Wow, I would agree. I think players, NFL players, probably more than any other professional athletes, don't like their jobs. And I look at a lot of people that would rather be doing what we're doing than their current job.
It's not that you don't like the job. You love the team you play with. You love your guys. You hate the establishment. You hate what they stand for. I'll give you a good example. The NFL asked me to do a thing during the Hall of Fame week. What I do, where they would come and ask me, how do retired players feel about the NFL? I said, you want me to do it? She said, yeah. I said, okay, no problem. I said, you sure? She said, yes. I said, all right. Came down to breakfast. It was 2, a girl and a guy. She said, Eric, I want to talk to you about how do you feel about the NFL? I said, now how do I really feel? Yeah, I said, first of all, I hate the NFL. I said, I think they're a bunch of crooks and liars. And I said even more. Lawrence Taylor was walking by. I said, LT. I said, watch this. How you feel about the NFL? What? The NFL? I hate them. I said, that's how most players feel.
LT was just mad because he didn't get to smoke any crack that morning. Look, the thing is this. The NFL owners are without a doubt a bunch of crooks and liars. But you have to expect that when you're dealing in business. You have to expect somebody to try to do you dirty. That's why it's up to you to collectively bargain properly. Guys get into these professional sports thinking that everything is going to be heavenly. And then they come to find out that it's a business. What does it mean to be in a business with other people, particularly people who have made their bones by getting over on people? You have to expect them to try to get over on you. Foreknowledge is to be forewarned. You have to know things ahead of time. You have to assume that people are going to try to do you dirty in negotiations because that's how these guys made their bones. Hopefully they can collectively bargain an agreement that will, that will provide some type of compensation for these old time players so that they won't be so bitter.
Richard Dent, how you feel? Man, I hate the NFL. That's how most players feel about the NFL.
Isn't that business in general?
Thank you. I agree. Hey, I give He rate me a little credit. They must have put some good chemicals in her peroxide. She's pretty much on point with this one.
No, not really. No, I don't think they hate
the
because you know why? Because they have guaranteed contract. When you're done with when you finish playing in football, it's like get out, don't come back, don't even come back to visit. We want tickets to the game. You can buy them like everyone else.
That
is how they treat you unless you're a superstar. Now, it's a superstar. I'm telling you, I know. I'm telling you, you can laugh all you want.
You want to bring that back up?
I can most definitely all day long. I can bring guys and say, oh man, I know how they treat you.
Well, when she said you want to bring that back up, which I'm sure most of you brothers know, Eric Dickerson got involved in a ticket issue, a game ticket issue with the Rams last year, which resulted in him exposing, what's this guy's name? The former coach of the Rams, Jeff Fisher. That's the dude name. Jeff Fisher is being a terrible coach. It's probably the best thing that happened to the Rams because it led to him being fired.
NBA players do not. I think most NBA players, when they exit the sport.
Oh, I completely agree. There's a difference between basketball and the NBA. I'm just saying in life, many businesses are run as shrewd businesses.
Absolutely. That's why you have to go into it, understand that, no, I'm not a big kid playing a little kid's game. I have to be about my money.
And I don't think we're taking away your freedom of speech in general by saying you can't talk about certain things at work. I mean, we're not allowed to talk about certain things at work.
Absolutely.
Work, and that's just the way it is in business. I understand their point, though, and let's create some conversation about this and do some things that push the limits so that we're forced to talk about it.
Yeah. To Dallas.
I'll end it with this. I agree with he raped me for the most part. I think that she was on point with this conversation. And, it's just common sense that right now things are going to occur to a lot of these players that are going to make them decide, do you want to be an NFL player or do you want to be an activist? It's going to be up to you, because a lot of these guys are starting to bathe in the accolades that they're getting from the internet and from cyberspace, telling them how great they are and the things that they've done. And the owners are going to put the onus on the players to decide, do you want to be an NFL player or do you want to be an activist? Because we're not going to allow you to engage in activism within our forum, which is affecting our bottom line, which is going to affect your bottom line. If you want to run around with the Black Lesbians Matter movement, you can do so on your own time, but not here. And once again, black men, I cannot accentuate this enough. This whole thing is not about you. And you're going to find that out eventually. You're going to find that out sooner than later. But anyway,